You're listening to Brainpower.
Hello, hello, hello. A new short form kind of video that we're doing here. So one of the things that the Morpheus community just generally, and myself personally as well, want to start doing is a better job of talking to community members in addition to the podcast, in addition to the town halls, and especially doing like screen shares and things like this to show off some of the things that community members are building and also just help spark ideas in other community members. And so joining me today is Thomas, who is a incredible contributor to Morpheus. And we talk about this persona of Morpheus user, which is kind of the product person, the person who is around developers and maybe has some coding knowledge themselves, but are not a software engineer, but has great ideas and understands product and can come up with things that should exist or they want to exist or problems that can be solved. And now how to use decentralized AI and all of these tools that exist and are being built to actually take their ideas and make them a reality. And all of these unlocks that now exist that wouldn't have existed 6 months ago, a year ago, certainly 2 years ago. And Thomas does a great job walking through a couple of things that he has built and is working on. And we touch on how if you're listening to this and you're somebody with great ideas, like how you can leverage these same technologies to make those a reality. So stick around. Appreciate you being here as always. And let's jump into it. I am joined by Thomas, who, if you're involved in Morpheus or follow the project, you should know by now. But if you don't, this is going to serve as a great introduction, Thomas, to you kind of more formally, to the broader community. But also, we, kind of talked about why we wanted to connect. And I loved this idea because it's actually, I kind of fall into the category of person that will benefit from this conversation loosely. There's definitely people who will benefit from this more than I will, but what we're talking about is how DAI and agentic AI and these new things coming to market and these things being built on Morpheus are massive unlocks, not just for software engineers and people who are traditional developers in that sense, but also product people. And maybe somebody who has a really good idea but doesn't know how to build it, which when I was saying I kind of fall in this category, well, I don't know that my ideas are really good. But this idea of having, hey, I have this idea, this thing should exist, I have no idea how to make it. Now these tools exist, so it's possible to make. But then it's almost like the dog chasing the car. You catch it, and it's like, now what? Like, what do I do? Like, how do I actually make these things a reality? And what are these tools that make these new things possible? So I think a good place to start, Thomas, is can you do just like a really quick, background of yourself and kind of how you ended up here?
Sure, happy to, Bo. Thanks. So I'm Thomas. I've been in product management for about 25 years or so, ranging from telecom to SaaS, blockchain applications, and more recently, been working on Morpheus. And the journey with Morpheus started for me about just a little under a year ago, where I reconnected with some of the team members that I knew from before, and got really fascinated by what they were building and the unlocks that came with it. And so, to the point you made earlier, right? Uh, AI just brings series of unlocks, and the biggest one for me was that ability uh, to try ideas. You made the point you're not sure your ideas are good. I'm not sure my ideas are good either. But the whole point is now I can make them real and see if they're good or not, and ask others if they're good or not, as opposed to something hand wavy and just described, right? Um, as a product manager, like a long time ago, I learned how to code, but I was never really good at it. And so that first unlock for me was the ability to interact with an agent and have that agent translate that mental picture that I had, that idea, into something I could interact with and others could interact with as well. So I could start collecting feedback, check, fitness of the product, if you will, like product market fit, And if essentially, is it a good idea, or did it sound good, but actually it was a terrible idea, and it's time to just throw it in the garbage?
Yeah. Well, and it just creates almost a whole new, like, I don't know if industry is the right word, but just the way things are made are fundamentally different now. I mean, when you have the ability to talk to these things in natural language, for example, so just in my own life, I've now become obsessed with making HTML dashboards for things because
Mhm.
I can just vibe code them into existence, and then you don't even need to be connected to the internet to use them. And so I've made a dashboard for like everything I could think of with my real estate financing business. Probably things that I don't even need it for, but just that I like that I can, and I can make this really cool, widget that looks amazing. And I would have never had the ability to make it before, but now people have the ability to take that so much further into services and consumer facing products and business to business products and things like this. Um, yeah, I think that this is really topical, and I know there were like some tools and things, Thomas, that you kind of wanted to show the community, and like how they can leverage these tools to make this type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I share my screen, just to elaborate a bit on what you said, um, to me, it changes like that ability to build product and evaluate ideas fundamentally changed the way I look at software in general, and the way I look at SaaS in general. And what I mean by that is, I've spent a lot of my career in enterprise, and with enterprise software, you kind of have to adapt to what that enterprise software brings to you. You have to inject it into your workflow and kind of tweak your workflow a bit to make it work with that tool. The big change that I've seen for me was I want to consume information a certain way. I want it formatted a certain way. I want to interact with it a certain way. Someone to hear it, someone, summary, someone chat, someone, full on report, like multi-page report. We're all different in the way we want to consume that information. But now I can take that source of information and convert it into a format that works for me, that allows me to interact with it the way I want. And one of the very first applications that I built, and I'll share my screen just to show what it looks like, was I like to like stay on top of news, see what's going on, read about, a variety of sources. And there are plenty of tools that exist that allow you to do that, which is great. But all of them were, 85% of what I was looking for. So the first application that I built just for myself was this one that, consults. So you provision a bunch of RSS feeds, because I wanted to make sure I didn't have, an AI agent hallucinating. But you provision a bunch of RSS feeds. It goes and fetches all the news, summarizes all the news, and presents all these news in different cards that you can, read, you can delete. They're all categorized. So like there's an AI category here. But also, if there is any kind of discrepancy across news, there's a yellow box that shows up. So let's see if we have one. Looks like there's no discrepancy today. But there's a yellow box that shows up in the middle that says, this news outfit described that news this way. That news outfit talked about it that way.
Hmm.
So in one case, the sky was blue. In the other case, the sky was green. And so now, instead of having to read both news and then sort of combine all the information in my head and look at those discrepancies, I have this, created directly at the application level. And another way I wanted to interact with those news is sometimes just reading the summary. I'll have one or two questions, and the only alternative that I had today was I had to read the entire article to see if it answered my question. So what I did is I went in and I added this Ask AI button, so I can go and ask a question about that news if I'm looking for something very specific related to that particular piece of information. I just type the question. It takes the context of the article, the context of the question, and then comes back with an answer. If it doesn't find the answer in the article. It just goes and searches for it on the web, but then tells me, hey, the answer was not on the web, but here's what I found.
Mm.
And so that way, that allowed me to interact very, very differently with the news without having to adapt to someone else's view of how I should consume news, how I should, read the news. Let's see, there may be let's see if I can. There you go.
Oh, there we
So
go. Yep.
here, right. So here you have like sort of discrepancies around an article from Mythos, and so you can form your own opinion basically based on those news, because I mean, we've all seen now the contradictions that we can read in the news, and being able to get that sort of global view is pretty cool. So that was really the sort of the first one that I played with. There's an iOS version of it because I wanted to have access to it on the go. I wanted to be able to interact with it wherever I was, and all this synchronizes with one database. So if I archive a news here, it gets archived on my phone as well. But it was really adapting sort of a broad data set to the way I wanted to consume it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that that framing that you gave prior to showing this, and obviously while showing it, it kind of just in real time changed the way that I'm thinking about um, making things with agents. Because yeah, I was certainly looking through it of the like through the lens of you're a product person, or someone might be a product person. They have this idea, they build this software, and then in the traditional sense, like they build this thing, now they push it out to a bunch of people, and hey, if they like it, they'll use it and adopt it and pay for it. If they don't, they'll find something that's a better fit for them. I wasn't thinking of it through the lens of, it's one thing to say, okay, I want a tailored version of like a news app, for example, specifically for me. But what can actually happen now is people, I'm trying to think of how to frame this. The words are not coming to me. I can make something that is designed for the purpose to then be reconfigured specifically to the end user,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to having it be a static thing. Does this make sense? Like,
Yeah,
up until right now, I was looking at it through the lens of, I'm using my agent to build this piece of software that is now static that somebody else can plug into, instead of this thing that works for me but is also amoebus. So if somebody else wants to connect into it, they can make their own configured version of this thing, which is
exactly.
fundamentally different.
Yeah. Yes, you can serve data, and I think that's why we're seeing websites implementing the slash llms.txt, so agents can consume that information, much easier, right? A lot of markdown files showing up everywhere for agentic consumption, and it to me like it's phenomenal because that really allows anyone to tap into that knowledge, tap into that information, and consume it whichever way they want, in whatever format they want. Building the first version of the application for this, if you strip away all the news collection and summarization and so on, it was basically an afternoon of just vibe coding and you know building something, trying it, going, oh, it'd be cool if it did this, and how about if I added that, right? And the whole Ask AI, I can also pick and use, click on post LinkedIn or post X, and it drafts a post for me that I can go, it combines it with, beliefs on AI or beliefs across a variety of industries, and then something I can just post directly on social media. So all these were sort of incrementally built ideas based on interacting not with an idea anymore, but the actual reality of the real form of that idea.
And is the inference being used? So, like for example, when you use the Ask AI section that you just showed me before, is
Mhm.
that being done through Morpheus right now?
Oh yeah, yes. Everything that you see is done through Morpheus. So the Ask AI interacts with Morpheus. The retrieval of the news is just reading news feeds, but then the summarization of the news, looking for discrepancies, Ask AI creation of the posts, all of it is done through Morpheus, and that's been another. I would say a second big unlock has been the improvement and the evolution rather of these open source models. When I started building applications, I started with Claude, like many others, and I still use Claude for certain things because it's a strong model, particularly in the software development. It's a very, very strong model, but that doesn't mean you have to use it for everything,
Mhm.
right? And so I started building with Claude. Now I use GLM 5.1 to do a lot of building. GLM 5.1 running on Morpheus. But even back then, when I was building using Claude, the moment it was built, it would only interact with Morpheus in the back end to do all the processing, all the data representation, all of it. Um, Another to give you another example, that's another application that I put together. This one is about understanding competitors, right? So as a product person, you need to understand your market, understand who your competitors are, and I can just feed a list of competitors or have the system find new ones. It searches every few days for new competitors, and then for each one of them, there's a summary. Why are they a competitor? Why are they a critical threat? A brief, strength, weaknesses, how we differentiate. And again, this whole ask AI on the side. If I have additional questions or if I want to update some of the information, I can now directly interact with the database at the back that
Wait, so just to make sure,
that
Thomas, I
contains
want to
all
pause
this.
here to make sure I
Yeah.
understand. So this separately, you provided context to Rivaleye, or ultimately your agent that is the brain basically of this,
Hmm.
and you explained who your competitors are for like any type of business that you may be operating. It's doing this analysis for you, but then based on the information that it's providing you, you can just chat to it right there in natural language and update the code base of your product or business or whatever it is just directly via your agent. Am I understanding that correctly?
So almost on the last bit, although that's a great idea, I have to think about that. It's more about interacting to better understand the competitors. So the way it worked is I describe the business
Yep.
and then I list a few competitors just to give the model some idea, right? So this is what this business does, and this is what a handful of competitors look like. And then it goes, finds new ones, does a full report, like a full summary on each one of those companies that it finds, and then it does a direct analysis on how big a threat they are, why they're a big threat or a low threat. Um, what makes them different, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. The Ask AI is more about getting more clarity on some of their offerings, for example. Um, Pricing or updating, right? Sometimes it came back saying, I couldn't find any pricing information. I go on the site, I find the page with the pricing, I just go, hey, the pricing is here. And it just goes and updates automatically the page to now show me pricing and then adjust the competitive positioning based on the pricing. But I can use it too to say, hey, write me a one paragraph that positions my product against them for some type of a battle card, for example.
Got it. Okay.
But I like your idea of using that to say, hey, add this to the backlog in my product so it can now deliver that piece of functionality that they have and that I don't have.
Yeah,
I like
I
that one.
was thinking, I guess, yeah, happy accident, because I was thinking, just as an example, like it's cross-referencing your competitors' websites. There's an FAQ question that they all answer on their website, but you don't on yours. It flags it for you, and now you're saying, oh, add that to my FAQ as well and update it, and then it's just updating your site in real time. So that is possible. I was thinking that's what you were saying, you were already doing that.
N-
Which,
Not
yeah,
yet,
feel
but
free to steal
ask,
it. That's a
ask
free
again on
idea.
Monday. Ask
Okay.
again on Monday.
My yeah, my new uh once Morpheus, really hits its stride and takes off, I'm just gonna sit on a mic all day and throw out ideas to people and have them go build it, because I would be happy to watch them use Morpheus to do it. But yeah, oh, that's amazing. I mean, this is such a good example of like a practical use case today. And yeah, I mean, it's all Morpheus inference on the back end. Can you talk about, some of the benefits, or like why somebody who maybe stumbled upon this would want to use Morpheus inference? And I know we touched briefly off air on like TEE and some of those upcoming things that have been announced and are like really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I think about inference, and really, I think the question is like, why decentralized DEI, right? Why would I use DEI? Um, there's a variety, like there's multiple reasons why for me DAI made sense. The first one was getting access to open source models, um, and having a marketplace to access all those different models, because not all models are equal. Um, so for me, that was a big one. The second one was, when I think about open source, it's really like it's built for third party products. That's the whole idea, right? It's every piece of open source code is out there to get plugged with or connected with other pieces of open source code. Um, Interestingly enough, I was listening to an interview from Kat Wu, the head of product for Claude Code, just a few days ago, and she made a very interesting point about the Claude harness not being designed for third party products. And that was in the context of the host, Lenny, was asking her the question, why did you go after the OpenClaw users and disable their access? And that was the answer. It was not designed for third-party products that have different token consumptions. Um, and we had to prioritize our first-party products because we're heavily subsidizing the usage. And I get that. I mean, I've been in their shoes, right? I understand the drivers for this, but as a user, um, I want to make sure that I have access to a system that, one, is open, because I firmly believe in the strength of open source. It runs the majority of the infrastructure we have today. I think when we look at people that have really changed the way we operate, open source developers as a community have had, by far, in my eyes, the most influence in where we are today, in technology across the board, right?
Hmm.
Um, so having access to open source, big one, but also tapping into a system that no one can shut down,
Yeah.
because here I am, right? Like I've now built applications. All these applications depend on inference to deliver their value, and today they just deliver that value to me. Tomorrow they may deliver that value to someone else, and I can't have a third party that has nothing to do with the application itself decide all of a sudden that, no, we're not going to let you use our inference to do that. Or, thanks for telling us everything you do with it. Thanks for all the prompts and all the data. We have now decided we're going to build our own version of that application, right? And you look at what happened last week with Anthropic launching Cloud Design, and what that has done to Figma. So open source models, um, unstoppable. Like no one can shut it down. No one can kick me out. Essentially, prevent me from using that inference was a second strong value proposition. And the third one is being able to take all that memory with me.
Hmm.
Um, as I build these applications, I had to make sure that I was not relying on any external system's memory, so that I had full portability. Um, and I could switch models, I could switch providers, I could do, whatever I wanted. But that gives the application so much more power that now, I can go in the marketplace. I can pick any provider that I want, any model that they offer, and that's it. The application will deliver its value. It may the output may change a little bit because of different models will give different outputs, but that's something we can all deal with, by changing prompts and so on. But the point is, all that data remains under my control. And like I still own all that data. I haven't taught someone how to do what I do, so that they could come up with a competitive product, and no one can shut it down. And the last point I'd make, and you mentioned TEE, was there are certain parts of my business where I cannot use large language models today because of the confidentiality of the data.
Mhm.
And the work that the Morpheus team has done by implementing a trusted execution engine, TEE, basically is the most recent unlock for me. Now that version 7 is out and that piece of functionality is out, I control the memory. The application that I have built can talk directly to the inference over a secure channel. I know I'm talking to the right GPU. I know it's running the right version of code because all this is verified. And so now the breadth of data that I can exchange with the LLM to get value out of has grown significantly, right? And if you think about it, TEE is sort of the complete opposite of what a closed system like an OpenAI or Anthropic is looking for, because they need access to that training data. And I don't want to, but also, I can't give them access to that data. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was such a strong, comprehensive response, and I think that as as people listen to people like you, Thomas, and also look at real life examples of what you can do with this, those like Lego pieces will start to click in for them as to the broader picture of why this all matters in the first place. It's sort of similar to the early days of like Bitcoin, and it started as people being like, well, that's just what was the Elizabeth Warren quote, shady supercoders or something to this effect. But then it's like, oh wait, no, there are all of these like very legitimate meaningful applications for this technology, and DAI is the same way. And I am personally obsessed with this idea of perpetual intelligence, and intelligence that can't be shut off or censored. I'm increasingly concerned with the way that information is shared globally, the way that it's censored or represented, or all of these things that we now have the opportunity to build a future where we can, verifiably make sure that we're getting as close to the truth on things as we can. And then that also is applicable to, business practices and the privacy component as well. I mean, we talked about this on the public spaces yesterday, but we start to think about like medical information,
Hmm.
or deep financial information, personal financial information. Like that's all stuff that you want to know is private and not being farmed by
Yeah.
XYZ mega centralized AI company and or state entity. You had mentioned the the fact that like models are continually getting updated and they're going to change, and so there's nuanced differences. Are you familiar with GenLayer? So this
Uh, Vaguely, not in detail, but
Yeah, so I wasn't meaning to, not to like no free ads, but GenLayer and things like this are kind of a solution for that, where they create a way to establish truth across models. So basically,
Mhm.
running multiple models simultaneously, whatever the most commonly agreed upon version of the truth is, kind of like gets adopted in the inference. And so I think things like that, whether it's literally that or something similar, will also basically evolve and become the case where you're not just relying on one singular model to get everything right all the time. You can kind of cross reference many of them at once. I think that down the line, something like that will be kind of how we solve that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you say that. There's another application which sort of sits over here, called it's a proxy. The reason why I built this was a little different from what you describe, but it kind of serves a similar purpose, where it takes the prompt, and before the prompt goes out, it has another LLM, and here I was using like a local Quen instance, inspect the prompt to see if it contains any personal or confidential information before it goes out, and then it can take the response as well and look at the contents of the response and grade the quality of the response too.
Mm.
So, same thing. I didn't know the exact like details or you described, I think, GenLayer really really well, but for me it was more, hey, I have this business problem, and that goes back to changing the way I look at SaaS, right? I have this business problem. How could I build a solution for it?
Hmm.
And now the first, I guess that's how, at least my brain's getting rewired. I used to think, which company does that, right? Let's do a build versus buy versus OEM type analysis. Now it's more a, like, build has become the de facto choice.
Yeah.
Can I build something that does it the way exactly I want, and I don't have to carry all that bloat with me?
So if somebody listening to this is, kind of that product person that you described, or basically, yourself six or whatever, I was going to say 6 months ago, it's more like a year or two ago, it sounds like, what would be your advice to them on what they should do to start building stuff? Like in practical terms, like, hey, I'm a product person, I have a little bit of, coding background, but nothing substantial. How do I start putting my ideas on paper, or in other words, into code, using the stuff that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it really started, like, for me, it really started by describing what I wanted, like going into VS Code, and right now I use VS Code with Cline and Morpheus GLM 5.1 at the back, and just describe what I want. Get Start with something simple, like this is the idea, and there's 50 other features that I want behind that one, but let's start with the basic idea. Let's get it done, play with it, and then I have a document where I put, oh, it should do this and add this and change that. And every now and then I sit down, I go in VS Code, I take my list and I go, okay, today I'm going to take care of these 5 changes or 10 changes that I want. And so really is this idea of starting from something small, interacting with it, showing it to friends, sharing it with friends, and getting their thoughts on it too. Having a running list of things to change and just iterating really, really, really fast. Um, and that's how all these products get built. But it's really the key becomes your ability to describe in plain language the idea that's in your head.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, um, but that's why you start from something simple. Um, Even though you're thinking about a much bigger product or a much bigger set of like feature set, start with something simple and build upon it. Fast iterate on it.
Got it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know other people within the Morpheus community have mentioned like having a SOP sheet, like a standard operating procedure sheet, because, and maybe this is just, I'm underestimating most product people's understanding of architecture. But the first thing I started thinking of when I was trying to vibe code apps and things like this was, okay, even if I can get something that functionally works, how do I determine that it's good and secure structurally? Alan would listen to this and roll over, because as a security backend guy, the answer is, well, I'm probably not going to build something that's secure and good. But what is your advice on that, or do you have a process for that?
Yeah, so I favor evaluating the usefulness and value of the application over its security. Because, first of all, like, does it solve a real problem? Does it solve the problem for me? Does it solve the problem for others? Every now and then, I take another model and I ask that other model to run a security, like a security check, series of security checks on the code that was put together. looking at dependencies, vulnerabilities and dependencies, things like that. But I favor building, um, solving the problem, getting the value over focusing on security right away. And I know, there's going to be different schools of thoughts on this. The reason why I take that approach is if a piece of software is super secure but it doesn't solve a problem, does it actually matter?
Mm.
If a piece of software solves a problem and it can solve the problem of many people, then you can justify even hiring a team to build it in a way that is far more secure. But at least everybody knows what it looks like.
Yeah.
Everybody knows how it functions. So um, I look at um, production of that software as a later step by first favoring the solving of a problem, contributing value to people. And I try to keep it within sort of reasonable lines by asking other models, hey, here's a repo. This is what the repo is supposed to do. Can you look for, security risks? Can you look for vulnerable dependencies, et cetera, et cetera? So I have a really long prompt that I use for that. It comes back with, a bunch of recommendation, implements the recommendations. So it gets me, I don't know, maybe 85, 90% of the way there. Although, if we hear the hype around Mythos, maybe it only takes me 40% of the way there.
Yeah,
Apparently,
true.
they found
Apparently
like a
we're all
hundred
going to get
and
one shot. Yeah, with
yeah,
yeah.
they
No,
found
I've
like 180 vulnerabilities in Firefox allegedly. So, we'll see. But if it gets me there, and now I can ask, 50, 100 people, do you like it? Would you pay for it? If they say yes, then I can go. I think the ultimate step for production ready is I like to have a human in the loop for this. And I'm not that human in the loop because I'm not a developer, but going and tapping, a dev on the shoulder and saying, okay, like this is what this does, look at it, and let's start refactoring perhaps some of the code to make it better. But at the very least, I know I'm solving a real problem.
Yeah, I
And
think
it
another way of putting it is like make it exist before you worry about making it good.
yes,
And,
exactly.
and we see this in practice too. I mean, we saw this with OpenClaw. How many vulnerabilities existed with the very first OpenClaw iteration, and then there was update after update after update as people continued to contribute. So yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and kind of assuages my personal fears, and hopefully other people's as well.
Yeah, and I'll caveat this by saying, like, if you're building like a cybersecurity product, don't take that path. But
Yeah,
but
fair
if
enough.
you're building an application that summarizes news or builds competitive analysis, the attack surface or the risk is, very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, I just think we're entering into this world where everybody is just fundamentally going to be a developer in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Like what that means is just going to completely change. Yeah, it's weird to think about, but I do think that's ultimately what's going to happen. Speaking of OpenClaw, I know Thomas, just through speaking with you, you've been more recently on the Hermes or Hermes side of things. Can you talk about why that's kind of your choice and what your experience has been so far?
Yeah, yeah. So um, I started using uh, Cloudbot, and then eventually OpenClaw, all using Morpheus at the back from an inference perspective. That's been sort of the common denominator. And um, I ran into a variety of limitations, particularly around memory and making sure that OpenClaw followed some of the SOPs that we had agreed upon. I've had some interesting interactions with OpenClaw where I would say, hey, like you built this, but you didn't follow the SOP. How can we work together better so I can remind you to use the SOP? And the surprising answer was, yeah, it's not a memory problem. It's in my memory. I just didn't consult the memory, so it's on me. so, so that I grew frustrated about it, but there was another part of me that really, really wanted OpenClaw to succeed. And don't get me wrong, like it's an incredibly successful project, but I really wanted um, to continue to work with OpenClaw. And I still, to some extent, do. But then when I experimented with Hermes, I got a very different experience with memory, where I would ask a question and Hermes would come back and say, "Hey, so we worked on something last week that's related. Do you want to start? Like, do you want me to start my work from this, or do you want to start completely fresh?" And so that was a very, very different experience because the experience I had with Hermes was closer to the one that I would have with a coworker when I'd go, hey, so, today we're going to talk about this feature. And that person going, well, actually, last week we were building this. Like, do you see this as something related or completely different? And that was sort of the experience that I had with Hermes. So I continue to work with both, although my usage, like I went from 100% OpenClaw to 20% Hermes, 80% OpenClaw, and now it's more like 95% Hermes, 5% OpenClaw. But I still want to continue to push because I want to see it, like I want to see it evolve. I want to see it become simpler and easier for everybody else to use. And I think it takes the innovation, the energy, and the desire of open source developers to create the first version, and continue to maintain it. It takes a community of other open source developers to continue to grow it. But I think it's also important to have a community of users that are willing to push through the growing pains of the software and contribute feedback. They may not be able to contribute code. Like I don't think it would be a good idea for me to contribute code that was built using, Claude or things like that. I think it's better to say, like, this is the problem that I have. This is how I've approached solving it. What do you guys think? But I think it takes a community of testers that are willing to push through the pain, um, to help the product become better and more usable, so it can now reach the next outer circle of people that won't be patient, that will expect the outcome right there and then, will want a good quality output. And if they don't get that good quality output, they'll move on to something else, or they'll move away from the space completely. Right. And so, just to go back to the works, a lot of the work that the Morpheus team has done, the Inference API Gateway, for example, has made it so much easier for everybody to access DEI. That's great because now you've had users that were willing to push through the intricacies and complexities of setting up in the early days of the node. Now it's much simpler with a lot of the work that Alan has put together. But it took all these people willing and sufficiently energized to push through that pain to now have something that's pretty much a one-click deploy, or pretty close to a one-click deploy.
Yeah, which is just amazing, by the way. Like I'm constantly amazed at the stuff coming out of the Morpheus community.
Hmm.
I've seen so many projects since 2017, and I've never seen one that ships more and has less, like the signal to noise ratio is
Yeah.
so incredibly insane in the Morpheus community, and it's just a matter of time ultimately, which is why I'm just remain so bullish just generally on the project. But yeah, it really is like incredible to see all of this come together. And I try to wrap my head around like where I think it's going at any given time, and the reality is like in terms of just the broader scope of
Hmm.
agents and private intelligence and the ability to build these types of things, and to your point, I mean I was somebody who was so convinced that OpenClaw just was going to be the Kleenex of like your of open source like agent framework basically, only for others to pop up, and I I I don't know if I see a way for there to be a singular answer, because what will end up happening, well, I guess that wouldn't make sense. I was going to say what will end up happening is there'll just be some integration point between like your OpenClaw agent and your Hermes agent, and then it's kind of all one and the same regardless. um and the pieces just keep growing. But yeah, not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think this is a really good overview for that exact type of person that we kind of started talking about, who's the product person that has experience with code but is not necessarily a developer themselves, but now has the ability to build applications like what you're showing. um Before we wrap up, Thomas, do you have anything else that you're building or that you want to show off that you have built, or maybe even just ideas to throw out there to maybe anyone that's listening to this to start building something themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I've been building a product to help map venture capital to startups. So you describe your startup, and it goes through a list of about 4,000 VCs and identifies, basically a bit like the competitive application does, identifies which are the highest fit to the lowest fit for what you do and how to engage with them. And then through the Ask AI, you can just say /contact, and it drafts, a cold outreach email or a follow-up email directly for you to send. So, that's been the one that I've been spending a bit of time on over the last week or so. What's next? I don't know. We'll see. Those things tend to be you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, it'd be so good if I could do this. Oh, well, I guess maybe I can. Let's give it a try. And there we go. So I think the recommendation is um, continuing to be curious and start from something small and go from there. And I think once you've managed to solve a small problem for you, like reading the news, it's a very basic problem, but it helped me sort of really visualize the strength of um, of like essentially what AI enabled for me, how it could change the way I was looking at things, and it flipped a switch. Now it's how can I build something to solve this? How can I build something to solve that?
I think that's incredible advice, and I think that's a good jumping off point. The only thing I would add to that is for those listening who take that advice, jot down those problems that they identify, decide to build solutions for them, come tell us about it.
Yeah.
Join our social channels, whether it's the Discord, it's X, it's our town hall that we host every Thursday, it's Manifest Morpheus Monday on Mondays. Get involved in the broader community, because a lot of like the kind of the questions I had earlier, even on the security side and things like this, there are people in the community who are experts in different facets of these things and can help out. Or we also just want to hear about the things that people are building and how we can, as a community, help push them forward, because ultimately open source is the ultimate rising tides lifts all boats environment. And so yeah, we look forward to see all the things that you guys build. And Thomas, I look forward to seeing all the things that you continue to build, and do appreciate you jumping on today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. And yeah, looking forward to what the community is going to build as well. So I'm super excited to see what's next.
You're listening to Brainpower.